Welcome to Under the Influence. In this episode, we'll be talking with podcaster and author Dan Jennings about his iconic book, Dancing Through the Fire, which takes you through a journey of Paul Weller's musical career. It's funny, it's gritty, it's organic, and it's utterly fucking brilliant. Welcome, Dan. How are you?
Oh, what an introduction. I'm very well. Thanks so much for having me.
And that would be my because this is the book here. What
Oh,
camera are
love
we
it.
on? We on that one there, dancing through the
Yeah, we
fire.
are. Yeah.
I'm
It's good, isn't it? It's good.
yeah, it's brilliant. I haven't read it all. I tell you what I'm doing. I'm listening to it via Spotify on audiobook, and it's
Brilliant.
brilliant. So as I'm working, I can listen to it. I am laughing out loud at some of the pieces in there. First, before we get into the book, though, Dan, I do want to know who Dan Jennings is. We briefly spoke off air, and you were telling me that you worked in hospital radio. So, is that how your career began?
Yeah, my love was radio. So as a kid, that was all I ever did really was listen to the radio and not just the music. I mean, I love music, but I loved the DJs, the radio presenters, the people talking between the tunes. I thought that was the best job in the world. And I remember my doing like a school careers thing. And my mum having going to the teacher and having that meeting, that awful meeting, and him going, he's got this ridiculous idea. He wants to work on the radio and be a radio presenter. I was like, well, yeah, that is a job. Why can't he do that? And I did. I was 15. I got hospital radio, and I went and collected all the requests on the wards, and eventually got my show at 16. I did work experience at the BBC, and then joined the BBC at a 17-year-old. Got a gig there, and yeah, I spent 12, 15 years, something like that, in radio on air doing radio shows, breakfast shows, and all that. So yeah, it was totally my life was doing that.
So, what radio station were you working on?
Oh, all the big ones. It was Orchard FM in Somerset, Dan and Joe the Morning Crew
Yeah,
by Sunsilk. I then went to Mercury Crawley. I was at the BBC in Bristol, I should
got you.
say, for quite a long
Sure.
time. And then I went to 210 in Reading, which was one of these big regional. That was I kind of fell out of love with radio a bit then. I had to talk. It was when Big Brother was on, and the people in charge insisted that you talk about Big Brother every. I just hate. And you had to kind of play songs like so. Kind of fell out of love. And then I went behind the scenes. I did branded content for quite a while. Those big stations in. I went there in what 2000.
This is the thing with radio. If you're not on the playlist, you aren't going to get radio airplay. And listening to your book, some of the things with Paul, you want to change your lyrics, Paul, because they're not going to get played on the BBC. Fuck it, I'm going with that. Like that's entertainment, a kick
Yeah,
in
there's
the
no
balls,
compromise. There's no compromise.
and
Is
that's
there?
what I've always loved with Weller. You know, what stage were you at in growing up? How old were you? Where you first discovered? Would it have been the Jam? Are we of a similar age? You look much younger than me.
I'm 50 in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, you are much younger than me.
Oh well, thank you,
You're very
man.
welcome.
You look better on it. I was. I reckon I was 16. I mean, it's hard to remember,
Yeah,
but I remember watching him on Top of the Pops, him as a solo artist,
yeah, got you.
and it was a song called "Aha Ho Yeah." So he was just on that kind of climb back. Really, it was such a banging single. I thought it was amazing. But I thought that it was hilarious. I thought that this was a new guy on the scene, and I went into. I lived in West Somerset. I went into the college there the following, just kind of raving about this bloke on the telly, thinking that I had found this new guy, Paul Weller, and we were all had it on in the common room or whatever, and everybody was like, "Yeah, so all right, yeah, I know what you mean." And we had some builders in, and I mentioned it to them, and they were like, "Yeah, mate, we've heard of Paul Weller. You want to check out his proper stuff, the Jam?" And then they brought in a cassette the following morning. I think it must have been Snap or one of these kind of weird
Yeah,
catalog things because it had a load of B sides and stuff. And then obviously I then discovered, oh, hold on, there's the Style Council as well. And so it was just diving into this amazing back catalogue. And then obviously he was also on the climb at that point. So we then got that first solo album. And then you obviously get Wildwood, Stanley Road, and this amazing journey after that. But yeah, it was that kind of wonderful thing where I discovered him as a new artist creating music. And I was on that journey and have been ever since. But also there was this amazing back catalogue of what must be over 100 songs, maybe 150 songs, I would guess.
absolutely. And in the song that you've referenced, he did take a trip down Boundary Lane, and that was one of the roads, well, one of the lanes in Woking. I mean, his musical references was quite phenomenal. I got into the Jam In the city, I remember my cousin introducing me to that album, and then my one of my older friends used to knock about the older friends Strange Town. But then I used to go running a lot, and I heard Little Boy Soldiers from the Setting Suns album, and it blew my bollocks away. I thought, Jesus, and he was the geezer then, and I've followed Paul ever since. I've been, I don't know, 13, maybe 14, and then got the back catalogue of the Jam and everything, and I just love the lyrics. I love everything about Paul Weller. I honestly think he's the greatest talent to have ever walked the planet. When did you first get the concept about the podcast of it was Desperately Seeking Paul, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm,
So it was. I mean, I thought for quite a while that I'd like to do a podcast, and I thought that I'd like to do it about Paul Weller because I was a fan, and I
yeah,
thought it would be interesting to just kind of talk to some other fans. Really, that was the idea. But I've held off on it for quite a while because I just kind of thought, well, anybody can do that. What's the angle? I can't just do a Paul Weller podcast. It needs to be something more than that. And the truth is, lockdown happened, and I got a bit of thinking time. That first one, when it was like February, March of what would it be in 2020, I think. And just got a bit of thinking time. And I was like, well, hold on. The truth is that I never got to interview Paul Weller during my radio days. And it was genuinely a regret of mine because I would hear him on the radio, and sometimes it was brilliant. Don't get me wrong. But other times I'd hear it, and you go, that person isn't really a Paul Weller fan. They haven't done
yeah.
their prep. It was just a wasted opportunity. So I created this podcast with the idea being like, here I am. I was a former radio presenter. I gave up that dream, that love of it. But I do have this nagging regret, which is that I never got to interview Paul Weller. So I created a podcast to make it happen. Now, it was very tongue in cheek. Most podcasts, not like this one, but most podcasts fizzle out over like 10, 15, 20 episodes, mostly because people get sick of doing the editing and all the research and stuff like that, I
Mm.
think. Or they don't find an audience, right? And there's hundreds and thousands, millions of those probably. So I thought it would just be a fun little thing that would maybe kind of keep me occupied during that second lockdown. We would then come out of it, and I was just going to get on with my life. And the whole thing just spiraled out of control. I got to interview some amazing people really like early on, like episode 1, episode 2. I was talking to people who have made documentaries about the Style Council, written massive coffee table books. And then Nikki Weller came on really early on. Andy Lewis came on really early on. So it just kind of spiraled out of control, if you know what I mean. And we just got everybody that you could think of to talk to over the course of 3 years.
And then the idea of turn it into a book, that actually come from Paul, didn't it?
Yes, I bumped into him at a gig. So he hadn't been on at this point, and I knew that lots of people were talking to him about it, and I knew that he knew about it because people had mentioned to him that maybe he'd listened to some episodes and stuff. Anyway, I went to a gig, and I Hannah Peel at King's Place in London, and I bumped into Paul in the garden. I went over to this table in the garden, and there were a couple of members of his band on it, and they'd been on the podcast. So I went over as Jacko and Tom, and I went over and was like, "Hi guys," and Paul was just tucked, I didn't see him tucked around the thing, and I was like, "Oh, hello, oh." And I had met Paul once before in 2007, 2008, and in a Sainsbury's car park randomly. And everything I had ever wanted to say to him just pops out of my head at that moment. All I could think to say back then was big fan, big fan. Luckily, that didn't happen that night, and we had a nice chat. But he immediately was like, "Oh, it's Dan, isn't it?" And he'd heard about the podcast. He was saying, "Look, you've got to turn it into a book." He's like, "You've spoken to everybody. I'm not going to do a biography, autobiography." He's like, "This would be it because you've spoken to everybody." And I was like, "Well, yeah, but you've got to come on." And it was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I'll think about it. I'll think about it." And that was episode 150. And I was like, "What do you mean think about it? Surely, surely, come on, the work's been done." Anyway, at the end of the gig, he came up and he was asking me what I thought of the gig. And then just before he went, he was like, "Do you know what? Let's do it Christmas special." And his manager then sent me an email the following morning. He's like, "I hear you bumped into Paul last night. Should we get it sorted?" And that was Christmas 2023. And then I mentioned it on a couple of radio shows or The Guardian, and I was on ITV News. All these ridiculous, amazing things happened. But Paul had said to turn it into a book because people were going, "What's next?" And then suddenly all these publishers were getting in touch, going, "We hear you want to do a book. Let's do that." And initially people were saying, "Oh, look, why don't you do like the transcripts, do a book of the podcast?" And I was like, nah, I don't want to do that. I don't know who's going to bother reading that. But the challenge was, how do you turn this into a massive, big narrative, a story arc, using all the little snippets, the little kind of segments of all these conversations? I had loads more as well. There were another 70 conversations I
Yeah.
had, and piecing together over 200 hours of conversations, which is nuts, really. I mean, it was completely insane. But 18 months of every evening and weekends pulling it all together, really.
How difficult was that process? Because when you're talking and you're doing a podcast, that's one thing, but then putting it into a book and the way that the book works is phenomenal. I mean, it really is brilliant, and I love the way that you slot Paul in to in the early days, like with the Jam and his mum saying, "Well, he was a Really wasn't he? And Nicky saying, "Well, yeah, he was." And like John is going like, "Nicky, you ain't going to work, going to school. We're going to New York." And
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
that, the way that the Wellers come across in that book is like everybody would want them as their mum and dad. They seem to have such a great childhood, very very similar to most of us working class kids. Not much in the way of um material things, but a
Mm.
lot of love and a lot of time given by your parents. I mean, John also started a football team up for Paul, although, he's, I mean, I remember watching a documentary and John saying, fucking look, try to buy bricks or something. If it weren't for music, he'd be fucked.
Yeah, he can do anything
And I
else,
think
can
that
he?
probably is about, he was just born to be an artist, wasn't he, Weller?
Yes, and I think there were lots of other things he tried and he was terrible
Yeah.
at. So thank goodness he found his
Mhm.
calling in terms of that and an audience. Although I think even if he hadn't have been, that would have been what he did. If he'd have just continued playing pubs for the rest of his life and whatever, he would have still done that. I think the fact that he found success and it became massive is brilliant. But I think that would have been what he's still stuck with from all the so to answer your question, yeah, I mean it was basically starting with the transcripts, and a lot of people helped me with that. And then essentially going, okay, well, let me start with transcript number one. Let me put all the little bits in the right place. And okay, now let's take transcript number two. Let's do the same. Let's slot those in. And what you'd end up with sometimes it would be this utter joy where you go, oh my goodness me, like a proper jigsaw puzzle. Like that bit connects to that, and then another bit connects to that, and this story just completely flows. It was wonderful. And but essentially, you do that over something like 250 transcripts, maybe more. And then so this document's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I'm just kind of scrolling endless. Like every night would maybe get one transcript done because you were just kind of finding the right place for that little bit, right back to the transcript, find the right place for that little. But it took ages and ages, and then what I ended up with was about 1.5 million words that you then had to shrink down to get it into. I think the book initially was meant to be 150,000 words. It's
Yeah.
250,000. We got it as like close to the edge as we possibly could, and I didn't want to compromise. I didn't want it to be just the Jam story, and then we skip through the solo years. Really important for me is that it covers the whole kind of nearly 50 years, more than that as you think about him as a kid.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was these wonderful moments you just kind of connected. It's like it works. That's funny, or that tells that story in a unique way. Or sometimes people were contradicting each other, and I really liked that. And then
Mhm.
I spoke to Daniel Rachel, who's a brilliant author and a music historian, and he was talking about the kind of format of all. And he was like, imagine they're all in a pub and they're all
Mhm.
talking to each other. And he was talking about it being a play actually as well. Like, imagine they're all on stage talking to each other and they're building on each other's stories. And that really helped. And then I spoke to Pat Gilbert, and Pat was kindly looked at some of the material earlier on, and he was like, "Yeah, that's boring, boring, that's boring." So that really helped me go, "Okay." But he was also like, "I've read it, brilliant. It's really entertaining. It really works." And that just gave me the confidence to go, "Oh, okay, I'm doing the right thing." Because I'm not an author, I'm a guy who works in radio for nearly. So those people gave me the confidence to go, "Okay, it's working. There's something in it. It does kind of tell a narrative. It does tell a story," which was really important.
So that is your first book. Is there going to
Mm.
be a second? Is there going to be any kind of follow up or spin off to Dancing Through the Fire? I know it come from You Do Something to Me, but how did you come about the title?
Then my wife came up with that.
Brilliant title.
Um, yeah, it really works, doesn't it? And I
Yeah, it
think it
does.
kind of touches. I mean, obviously, it's his probably his most famous song, certainly in terms of um, listens on
Yeah.
streaming and all that now, but also views on YouTube. It's had like 16 million or something. And my wife is not a massive Paul Weller fan,
Mm.
but she will very much know that song. I've tried taking her to gigs and stuff, and bless her, she comes along occasionally. But she's like, you know what, you do your Weller thing on your own. Off you go. But she knew that song. But I think also the dancing through the fire thing fits with the idea of kind of actually he's going too close to the flame and he's getting burnt. And these kind of things are happening where he splits the jam or the Style Council
Mm.
final record gets rejected. He's having to start again. So it really worked really nicely. And then we, chatted with Paul and the team, and the authorized oral history was really important as well. And they were happy to do that because everybody who's in it is authorizing the story,
Mm.
including Paul. But, like you said, Anne's in it, Nikki's in it, the family are in it, but all these people that I've spoken to, and over 250 guests, are kind of authorizing it as well. So that was a really lovely thing. And Paul's written the foreword as well, which was amazing.
Yeah, it was superb. I'm going to give it another. on the camera there dancing to, I mean, it really is. If you drop this book on your foot, you're gonna break an ankle or
Yeah,
at
somebody said
least
they
a
were going to take a holiday,
metatarsal.
and they went over the baggage allowance.
What I love as well is I love the cover with Paul, and I've just wrote down there, you know, penny for the thought. I think you really captured a moment where Paul is just looking as if to think, "What am I going to do next?"
Mm.
Was I remember listening to Arsene Wenger, and he was saying that when a football season finished, he'll give yourself a few minutes, and then I'm preparing for the next season. And I think Paul
Mm.
seems to be doing that with a song. He's written a song, he's done a song, and he must just sit there and think, "What am I gonna do now?" And he's just momentarily easing into space there. And it's not worth a penny, that thought. It's worth £1,000,000, ain't it?
It's a great shot.
He's
I think also
brilliant.
he looks so cool, and the fact
Yeah,
that he's just wearing a jumper,
yeah.
but he looks so cool. The hair's great. It's not, yeah. There were some times where the Barnett's all over the shop. A few people mentioned that book. He looks great, but also what I didn't want to grab was a kind of a shot of him as a kid, the Jam, the stuff, because it's like, what era do you pick in those times? If I pick a shot from the Jam, it's like, well, it looks like a Jam book, but I think it looks like him as a kind of elder statesman. And I didn't want a picture of right now either. I think it needed to kind of fit somewhere. So that's, yeah, 2015. That's a shoot from Saturn's Pattern.
And a great album as well. I
Mm.
mean, he has produced and written so many great albums. Quite a lot of them got to number one in the album charts. He's never had a number one solo or with the Style Council. He's only had the
No.
4 number ones, hasn't he? Which I
Yeah, you're
find
right. Yeah, Beat Surrender would have been the last number one.
unbelievable, yeah. I mean, some of the songs with the Style Council, I mean, my first dance, like at my wedding, was You're the Best Thing. That is an absolutely banging tune. You Do
Yeah.
Something to Me, phenomenal tune. Walls, Shout to the Top. I mean, there are so many, and in his like the changing man, there's so many songs that Weller has penned. I'm thinking, how come he's only ever had the 4 number ones? But I think it says a lot more about what the charts are today. It was important back in the 70s. I think
Mm.
the bands going back to the Jam, there was that connection with the fans. We all grew up. I mean, unjamming the Jam in 1982 was probably the biggest heartbreaking situation that any of us kids had lived through, although I was prepared for that because I'm a Birmingham City supporter, so I'm used to disappointment. Yeah. And I think
I'm sorry about that too. I mean,
Villa had
you
just
know,
won the European Cup as well, so
oh,
I'm going,
brutal.
"Fuck me, thanks for that, Paul, you really fucked up my Christmas."
Oh, man.
But but but, to do that as a 24-year-old kid and the Jam being the best band, as John would say, and rightly so, best band in the fucking world, I mean, that took some balls, didn't it?
Yeah, and I like the idea in the book that, there's Paul's truth
Yeah.
and what he believes and why he did it and why
Mm.
he says he did it. And I don't know why he would lie about his own feelings. But what you also get is everybody else's angles
Yeah.
on it as well. And there's obviously different
Mhm.
perspectives. And obviously Bruce and Rick, who were in that band with it. There's many fans who are still furious now and they
Yeah.
didn't forgive him, and that's cool. I don't understand it because I love the whole journey, but that's cool. Um, but you also get it from the tour managers, and we get it from the record label, Jim Cook, the guy who ran the label or ran A&R in the label. Um, and it's not a clear picture. I think, Paul made that decision. He didn't think about it for a long, long period of time, which you would have thought a decision of that magnitude would have to have been thought about. Certainly in the making of the gift, that final album, it was. I think Bruce, Rick, certainly Rick, who's obviously no longer with us, but he talked to me, and I think he talked to others about. He thinks now, or did that it was more of a financial thing. But actually, Paul dismissed that because he said my dad was furious. And I kind of get that because it's like if it
Mhm.
was a financial thing, then John would have been in on it as well, and then John would have been going to Paul, "Come on, let's bin off the other two. We can make." So that doesn't make sense to me. But I like the idea that look, here's all the stories, here's all the angles. Ultimately, as a reader and as a fan, make up your own mind. But it's undoubtedly what you can't deny is by doing it, that band are in a capsule. that cannot be messed with. It's a perfect, what was it, 6-year period? Longer if you count the kind of youth, but certainly
Yeah,
6
yeah.
years as a recording artist in
Mm.
77 right the way through the end of 80. That is perfect. There's not many bands who have that quality that's not been messed with. And if, let's say they went on, let's say all the music the Jam did, oh, sorry, the Style Council did were Jam songs. The Jam fizzles out at the end of the 80s because Paul, Bruce, and Rick are doing their house album. We wouldn't be talking about the Jam the same way now. And I think what Paul did was really I don't know that he thought about it in this, but certainly what he did do is put it in a moment that you can't mess with it. You can't, and by not coming back to it either, he didn't ever tinker with it. It's like it's perfect, a perfect start, and it's a perfect end, and the journey throughout is amazing. B-sides, and he left, and what a great thing. That'll always be there. You can't mess with that.
Paul had always maintained, though, didn't he, that he didn't want to go on, you know, not meaning it. And how could he, as a 60-year-old bloke, stand there singing like "When You're Young"? And he just wanted it. He captured a movement of the youth of us kids, and I think that's what he became really, and it's been said many, many times, a spokesman for a youth movement and a generation of kids. And it appeared like with Paul, I think you alluded to it earlier, he'd be quite happy just playing clubs and earning a few quid. Because I don't think listening to Paul at any interview, any written interview, it was ever about the money. It was all about the music. And
Mm.
I think that, when it starts getting like really big, I think he kind of thinks, well, fuck, time to move on and do something different. And again, he could not do what he did with the Style Council with the Jam. It was
No, it was a different
impossible.
thing. A
The
totally different thing.
fans would
And I
the
think
fans
also
wouldn't have had it.
those gigs around that time, he'd
Yeah.
just come off the back of the maybe Japan, was it the Trans Global Express tour?
Mm.
And I think he was feeling like, the audience was all very blokey.
Yeah, they were.
Yes, there were female fans, but very
Football.
blokey still.
Mm.
He'd be playing these new songs and there'd be all these fights.
Yeah.
And I think he just got a bit like, I want to do different music, different
Yeah.
styles of music. I want to freshen it up in that way. But I can't do it in this kind of constrained thing as a band, but also the audience to a certain extent. And Nicky talks about it a lot, where suddenly and Anne actually, the Style Council come up, and it's like almost 50-50 of like women and men, and it's kind of a different thing entirely. That wouldn't have ever happened with the Jam. He wouldn't have been able to
Yeah.
do that. He wouldn't have been able to cast those people aside and move on in that way. So I think that was part of it as well from all the conversation.
Absolutely. And I think with the conversations regarding the Jam and split, etc., they actually all can be right, because what somebody's opinion or vision is doesn't necessarily mirror up or match up to somebody else's. So
Mm.
Paul, being as headstrong as he appeared to have been and always has been, doing his own thing, decided to move into another vehicle. That Trans Global Express drove him into the Style Council and Speak Like a Child. I love that bit when that bloke, like, he was saying, duck, duck, duck. And where is he? He'd got it by the branch. I
I mean,
was
can you
pissing
imagine?
myself
I
laughing
can't
reading
imagine
that.
Bruce and Rick doing the long hot summer video on the River Cam. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
I don't know how that's.
I remember at the time though when that come out. I mean, the fans were going furious about it. But I had the pleasure of I've interviewed Rick, God rest his soul, and you know Rick was talking about the Jam Day, and I love the story about the lion as well. And people would think that didn't happen, but it did. And you can imagine, like, the Jam turning up in this like Luton van and opening the back, and there's a fucking lion. And I says to him, "What happened?" I think it went for one of the women, didn't it? Like, not trying to
I
bonk.
heard
I
that.
think
Yeah,
he was
yeah.
trying to bonk her. I think the woman had got one of these fur coats on, and the lion got a bit frisky. But it just everything that happened with the Jam just seemed just an amazing journey. I think Dennis Mundy really comes across fabulous in this book, as does everybody as well. But again, the Style Council, I loved the Style Council equally as much as the Jam. And I remember interviewing Whitey, and I said, "You must have pissed yourself laughing with some of the lyrics," because he was literally taking the piss in a different way. I think the bloke's an absolute genius.
Yeah, so many of those Style Council songs were so clever in
Yeah.
terms of the political content, and wrapped up in a catchy pop song that you want to sing along to was brilliant. I think songs suddenly he's showing his kind of, his lovely side where he's like, this is me as somebody who, yes, I'm in love, and here's a love song. And I know we had English Rose, but he kind of hidden that away. The first time
He
that came
did.
out, he hid that away. It wasn't mentioned on the album, right? So it was lovely to see that a different side of Paul, and obviously I'm seeing that in retrospect now, and I'm seeing it as part of the kind of storytelling of all these interviews and. But there are so many sides to him as a songwriter, obviously as a human being, that you got to see in the Style Council. And the sense of humor is amazing because I think so many people were like, "Oh no, Mick was the funny one," and then when Mick joined him, he was kind of telling Paul, "Well, let's do this, let's do this," and then the fans were like going, "Oh, that Mick's making Paul look like a right pillock." And it's not. It's like Paul's very funny. He
Yeah.
is. He's got a great sense of humor. And he was suggesting things to Mick. It was the other way around at times.
But I guess, in essence, Paul has always been the front seat driver, hasn't he? Of whatever vehicle he's decided to drive at whatever time. And he's
Mm.
always had his opinions and doing things. And he's so creative. And I think that Mick was the ideal person to bounce them creative ideas. But I don't think reading the book and listening to Paul since I've been a kid that anybody would have ever told him what to do. They might have given his an opinion. I think he was similar to Brian Clough in those respects. I'll listen to what you say and I'll do what I want.
Yes, and I think a lot of artists are like that,
Yeah.
aren't they? Like that
Mm,
kind of singular vision where he obviously listens to a lot of people that he collaborates
yeah.
with, and when you're in that zone making stuff together, it's a very collaborative thing. And I think it was, but with Bruce and Rick at times, I think it certainly was with Mick, and certainly through the solo years. But you're right; it's like ultimately it's his vision,
Mm,
and always, really, always has been. I
yeah.
think even like there were a few. Bruce said himself, he's like he's not a lyrics writer, although he wrote a few.
Mm,
But it was Paul that was having to do that. And I think ultimately in the jam, Paul then felt the pressure of that and writing that. He felt freer when he got to the Style Council because it felt more collaborative.
yeah.
Those first, certainly that first album, there's a lot of instrumentals, a lot of mixed stuff as well. Um, but I think he's always done that. But you're right. I think ultimately the buck sits with him. Whether it was the Jam, the Style Council, or Paul Weller movement, or Paul Weller solo, it's really been his name above the door in that sense, as the kind of guy who writes the lyrics, and generally is writing the melodies to go with the songs and all that as well, right?
And his influences as well, the Liverpool Poets and, the Respond label that, he's always promoted kids and music. And he's never been frightened to just push those boundaries and just test the water, as you've alluded to. The first Star Council album is so different. And they were all like honorary councillors invited, and they were all young kids as well. So it was always creating this movement. And I think that you're right, the crowd was different. It was almost like the Jam, a football crowd, and then it had moved to a more melodic and a more soulful. He was into a lot of different things. And he's always been into like music, clothes, and the usual things that all us Saturday kids have been into.
Yeah, that comes. I mean, fashion obviously is a real
Yeah,
key part of his makeup and the love of clothes and the mod stuff. I think that's all wrapped up. Like the mod look was something he discovered as a kid. He's then getting a moped and riding around, woking on this moped, looking very out of sorts, very out of his time in a certain way in that sense. But he's obviously created labels where he's had clothing ranges and stuff. So the style's very important. The music's the biggest driver. There's not an awful lot else apart from family as well. There's not an awful lot else that he's talked about in his life. It's kind of those three things really. A bit of
mhm,
football. He's a bit of a Chelsea fan, but not properly really. Doesn't go to all the games. Although I saw he was at one of the Barcelona match the other night. But it's really those two big drivers, the family as well, are the biggest things. So he's always constantly thinking about music. And like you said earlier, it's like it's often what's next.
yeah.
So as soon as he's done, it's like, well, okay, where are we going to take it now? How am I going to excite myself? How am I going to shake this up and do it differently next? Which is exactly what you want from any art, actually. You want that from a film director or a painter or whatever, that you're going to get a surprise as a fan of their work.
Again, his music, it touches you in different places. I mean, there's one off True Meanings album, "My Love Travel with You."
Oh yeah, it's
That
great. Yeah.
song, it just hits you, don't it? And Paul Weller just pen songs and music that just hits you, or certainly hits me, where nothing else has ever hit me. I'm like, wow, it almost it almost melts your soul. But going back to Chelsea, I think it was more the imagery of Osgood and Charlie Cook and Hudson, the King's Road, and the iconic Chelsea set and scene, and the fact that like Osgood had got a suede head. He was into that
Yeah.
scene, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that was kind of like they were the fashionable
Yeah.
team, both in terms of, and they were the guys that you would see as almost pin-ups, I would guess,
Mm,
in the press, and that ever looking cool, looking sharp, and all that. And it was also, I think, that just the first game he went to, and I guess it's relatively
yeah.
local, close-ish to Woking, that you can get there quite direct, whatever. It's obviously not his local team, but probably was the most local top division team maybe at that point. But anyway, they were stars, weren't they? And they were
Yeah, they
celebrities, those
were.
Chelsea.
Mm.
But I don't get the sense that he's followed it all the way through as a diehard
No,
fan.
not at all.
Although I'd imagine he
Mm.
kind of was, when Zola was there, he was loving that and a bit Mourinho and dipping in and out. He's got a Chelsea tattoo. I don't know if you got to that bit of the book
Has he
yet.
really? Yeah, no, I haven't
Yeah,
got to
yeah.
that yet.
Well, you'll see what you'll when you get to
Fair
that bit of the
play.
book, you'll read where that is.
Yeah, that actually has quite shocked me because I just didn't get that he was like really, really into football. It always seems to be music first, second, and last. Well, we've clothes as well.
You can see behind me, so I don't know if you see here, so this side here. So there's the podcast artwork, which
Can
was a
see
drum
that, yeah.
skit that Paul signed. There's the Stanley Road picture here, and this here, that is John Terry next to C3PO. John
Mhm.
Terry lifting the Premier League for the first time under Mourinho. There you go. Signed by John. I'm a Chelsea fan as well, not because of Paul. My
Right,
face is
okay.
bad, but yeah, they're my club and all. But they're my club because my dad brought a program back from West Ham versus Chelsea, and he's a West Ham fan, so I went with the other club just to piss him off.
I think to be fair, so was John Terry's dad, wasn't he? He was a West Ham.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
that iconic picture ain't there, where they're giving him the signs when he scored a goal. But Paul, moving from the style counter, I love the account of Dee that she like. I didn't know who the Jam was. I didn't know like Paul well, and you're thinking, really? But she didn't, did she? And we kind of think that everybody knew who Paul Weller was. Every boy of a certain age wanted to be Paul Weller. We all loved the Jam. We all loved the image and everything else. But there was another load of people that didn't know who the Jam was, and clearly Dee was one of those. But I mean, how gorgeous was DC Lee in the early
And what a
80s?
voice! I mean, still
Ah,
now, like, she had a solo album out
what did
last
you
year, wasn't it?
notice first, though, of Dee in the 80s? Her voice or her looks? I thought she was the most beautiful
Well, no, because you
person.
have to remember, I'm going back, right? So my
Yeah, true.
discovery
You're
was the
too.
90s.
Yeah,
So
I know.
my first time of
Yeah,
listening to D was just listening on this crummy cassette. And
yeah.
actually, a lot of those really early songs, because I think I remember the live show, the Japan one.
Mm,
And I didn't know, and it was actually Jay Williamson, Jay Ella Ruth, as she's known. Jay's in
yeah,
the book, but she did a stint with the Style Council when Dee had a gap. Dee had to do a solo album. It was
yeah,
about 6 months, maybe 9 months, I think, where she was on the road. And it's odd because a lot of the time you see footage and it gets credited as Dee, and it's like that's not Dee, that's Jay.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, so my discovery was all retrospective, man. I was kind of like I was listening to the music, and then and we didn't have YouTube. I was having to buy the
yeah,
DVDs or the videos rather. And so the VHS I got was that live show. I can't remember when I first really realized that Dee was a thing in that band, a person in that
yeah,
band. Probably even more so like solo, really, because she was obviously on that first solo album and she sang on Wildwood and maybe even a bit of Stanley Road, perhaps I can't remember now, but certainly the first two she was on. So I probably knew about it and also, I mean, obviously See the Day. I knew that
Oh,
song.
great song.
That's great. But I hadn't realized the Weller connection. The fact that
Mm,
it was like she couldn't get it released, and John Weller actually, I think, the Wellers bought her out of that deal,
yeah,
really, or certainly put all the money behind it to promote it, and they got a string section, all that. It was really, and they weren't Paul and B weren't together at this point. It was just again that back to that thing, like you say, of Paul supporting an artist. He was a singer in the Style Council with Paul. They would go off stage and let her sing that bit. Like Paul would go off and she would sing that on stage in front of
yeah.
the Style Council. That's her support, which is just brilliant. And then obviously it was what was their number 3 hit, so like as big as anything that Style Council did chart wise, I think. Yeah.
I thought you an unbelievable sound, an unbelievable artist, and really a top looking bird. You can see why Paul Weller fell for her. But again, as you say, there was just loads and loads of different artists that come together in those days, and Paul was never really, he's soul deep with the minor strike. He's always got into the nitty gritty of kind of like politics, although he's been, I suppose, a little bit, you would say, apolitical more so these days. Although he's just done the thing for Gaza, so he's always dipped his toes in, and he's never been frightened to say what he believes. Although I don't think there's many people these days that you can believe in.
I think it's the thing about he's not afraid to put his head above the parapet,
Yeah,
right? And it's like actually, regardless of what that is, and I think, back in the day it was maybe political, you could say, but actually, yeah, I suppose it was because it was, it was the miners' strike was a political action
yeah,
from Thatcher's government, right? I think more so recently he's done things like the homeless
yeah.
gigs that he's done and support, and there was the I Woke Up from '66, the video that supported that and supported homeless charity and
Mm,
stuff. So there are other elements of it, and you would argue that, I mean, I guess homelessness is probably a political issue as well, but it's not a party political issue. So that kind of the point I'm making is like he's coming at that from a humanitarian thing
yeah.
in a sense. I think the Gaza thing is, look, that's a really tricky topic.
Mm,
But everything I've seen of Paul, and I get it on social media whenever I plug anything of Paul's now, I just get the kind of anti-Semitism complaints coming back at me. I've not actually had a conversation with Paul about it. I would love to,
mm.
but I don't think he's like everything I've seen is not him coming at it from that. He's coming at it from
No.
I'm seeing kids and
Yep.
parents being bombed and innocent
Mm,
lives. And I don't care what side anybody's on, those are appalling images, right? You
yeah.
can't deny that. I don't think if
100%.
you're in Israel and you're Jewish,
Mm,
that you're looking at those going, those are a lovely thing. That's my evening. So I think he's coming at it from that. And I think that's kind of okay. And again, there is politics wrapped up in that. Of course there is,
mm.
because, it would appear that we are selling arms to Israel and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think he's coming at it from that.
No.
But to answer your question about the kind of the bit where he's kind of he didn't really go on about that. I think he always felt that he'd kind of written those songs,
Mm,
and it's like, well, I can't write them again. And those songs, sadly, mean the same thing. Going underground means the same thing. Eating rifles, that ain't changed a bit. It's just got
yeah.
worse, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, well, what
Mm,
else can he say when he said it already? And he's still performing some of those songs live now, so they still have the same meaning, if not more so. So but I do kind of think that whatever his view, agree with it or not, he is not afraid to speak his mind. I don't know what Ed Sheeran thinks about any of that stuff. Do you? Hasn't said a bloody word. Probably should do about something in his life. And that's no criticism of Ed, but I think the industry just kind of pushes people into a space and they just kind of go, you're media trained, don't touch any of that stuff. I don't know that we want that from this. I would love some of those people to come out and say, you think about all kinds of issues,
mm.
but yeah, why not? Why
I
not?
I think most of the artists, and I use that word loosely today, are all bubblegum artists. Paul
But
Weller
they've
is.
got a platform.
Oh,
Like you've got a
yeah, absolutely.
platform.
Yeah,
Why are you not doing that to do something good with it?
but I don't think they do, because I think that the way I look at it, if they do come out and say something, they might lose a load of fans. They might
Yeah,
get,
yeah.
whereas Paul's gone, and he's done it through his whole career. I don't give a fuck what you think. I'm doing what's right. I think he's a compassionate man. He's a human. What's that human when they call people? I don't,
Humanitarian.
humanitarian. Thank
Yeah,
you. And I always struggle
yeah,
with the Greek names. But I think Paul's Paul's always done that. Will Paul's end, a bomb exploded in another town. He's not, he's always written about stuff. I remember someone saying, Paul Weller don't write political songs these days. And I thought, fuck me, have you heard 7 and 3, the striker's name? Them
yeah.
fuckers in the castles, they're all
Savages
bastards
of
too.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right.
so
Yeah,
he's
exactly.
always been on the right side of humanity. And I think
Yeah.
he's just a good egg, a good onion, Paul Weller, and he would do anything to help any cause without any political bias on any way. He just puts people first, and in terms of that, it's all about the kids. I think he will always be the same, because he's always said that his values that he was given by his parents are still as true today as what they were back then. Growing up, although his music has changed a bit, and when you you talk about things as a granddad completely different as you would as a
Mm.
teenager. And if you don't, I think you need to look at yourself in the mirror. But I think he's always been an absolute top banana, to be fair, Weller.
Yeah, it was interesting. There's a quote in the book where he talks about a friend of his, and he doesn't name him, although
Yeah.
I've heard since it's Roger Daltrey. I don't know if that's true or not, but he
Okay.
said,
Allegedly.
and he said that they said, "Oh, isn't it funny that we're now middle class?"
Yeah.
And Paul went, "Well, you might be, mate, but I'm not."
Yeah.
And I put the little video clip of that because I filmed the most recent interview I did with Paul, and I
Yeah.
asked him about that.
Seen that.
And and oh no, actually that was from the podcast when I was
Yeah.
thinking. Anyway, I put that clip up on YouTube and Facebook or whatever, and the amount of people who kind of came in going, he's not. He's middle class, and it's all right for a millionaire to say that. And oh, didn't he send his kids to public school and all that kind of thing? And I think it's missing the point, right? The
Mm.
point is those values that you're talking about that were instilled in him as a kid from his parents, from his folks, from that kind of upbringing in Woking. And let's be honest, they weren't destitute, right?
Yeah.
Paul and
Mm.
Nikki never went with that. Like
Yeah.
Paul said, and both of them said to me, it's like their family did, like mum and dad did,
Mm.
and the phone would get cut off, and they'd have to, hide under the sofa to stay away from the bailiffs and all
Mm.
that.
Yeah.
But they were still able to live and feed the family and all that kind of stuff, right? So they weren't the full end of poverty. But at the same time, those values still live. And that's the point that he's talking about. It's like, actually, my
Yeah.
working, I still believe in those things. Yeah, I don't, and he said, I don't care how much money you've got and I don't care what size house you've got. Those are the things I believe in. And those kind of values still live in me. And I think that's true. I don't know. I don't think when you then put your kids to a private school or whatever, they didn't do that with all the children, but that changes you. That changes them maybe, and that will then be
Mm.
different for their upbringing. It doesn't change your own roots. You can't, that can't ever change, can it? So I think there are, but again, look, I love the debate on it. And
Yeah.
I love when you kind of put those things live, and
Mm.
people will read that in the book and they'll disagree with bits of it and they'll disagree with Paul on it. That's cool. That's fine. You want some of that healthy debate. I think we've got into a position now where so many things, like we've lost the art of debate. It's either
Yeah.
you're far right or far
Yeah.
left,
Yeah.
and there's no kind of, well, actually, I could agree with some of those things and some of these things, and it's a
Mm.
bit more nuanced of an argument of that. We don't have that anymore. It's just it's right or wrong and arguments of one side or the other. That's not how we live life, you know.
I think that's what social media has done because there's no
Mm.
content or context to it. Is that someone saying something, then they'll jump on and well, you're wrong, I'm right, and you can both be right. You can look at things in balance, and I think we've lost that ability to talk with each other
Mm.
and listen to each other and thinking, well, hang on, you've actually got a point there. I was coming from this point here, but I've listened to you, and I'm coming from another point. But again, Paul's never been shy to say what he believes. And I always remember listening to him. He's always like, no matter how much money I've got, I've always, known how much it is to buy a loaf of bread, or a bottle of milk. And, you can still be a socialist. I mean, I'm a socialist. I mean, I ain't got a pot to piss in, but that's irrelevant. But you can be a multimillionaire and still have social values. It's what you believe. And I think Paul has always been true to his beliefs.
Mm.
Whether people like it or not, I don't think he's going to lose any sleep. I don't think he gives a fuck. And I think that's the right way to go about it. And who are those people to judge him? They've never walked a mile in Paul Weller's shoes. So how would they know what it's like to do what he's done or lived his life? So they're not anybody to judge Paul Weller.
It's also that thing of like, look, you can. There's Paul Weller, the man. There's a story
Mm.
that's wrapped up in that music, and but you can also like some of the music without digging into all that kind of stuff as well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
You do something to me is a
Mm.
perfectly brilliant love song, or unrequited love, actually, but it's seen as a love song.
Yeah.
Um, that's fine. Like, you don't need to kind of go, well, I believe that we should end privatization and take all the water companies back into our own control. I mean, we should bloody do that
Yeah,
as
I
well.
do. I
Anyway,
agree as well.
but
Clause
anyway,
4.
but do you know what I mean? You can still love that music. You can
You
still
can't,
love
yeah.
Peacock Suit. You can
Yeah,
still
yeah.
love Wildwood. So you don't. And I think that's kind of that's cool. But I think for people to kind of go, "Oh, I hate it when Paul gets involved in politics," it's like, well,
Yeah,
you've not seen the whole story when
exactly.
he's done that in so much of his lyrics. Is kind of like laughable, really.
Yeah, and I mean, I love the bit when he was talking about David Cameron jumping around to eating rifles and thinking, "You don't get it, mate, do you?"
Yeah, yeah.
But again, that's the thing. And if they do gig it, then great because you can. It's the music, the lyrics. I always think come secondary to the music because a song hooks you in. You like the song, and then you want to know about the song.
Mm.
I think it's like a bird. you know, okay, she's got a nice personality and you like her for the personality,
I thought you meant like a
but
bird that flies.
no, but I mean, if you're in a pub, you're attracted to
A
a bird.
seagull.
It's the look, isn't it?
A
So I think,
lady. Okay.
yeah. So I think with the song, it's the song that attracts you first, and then
Yeah.
when you like the song, you look at the lyrics, and the lyrics are just as important as the personality is to the looks. Is what I'm trying to say. So
Yeah,
you
yeah,
need
exactly. I
someone
mean,
to hook
I
you
couldn't
in.
tell you at 16 when I was going in through all that back
Mm,
catalogue that I really understood the politics of all the lyrics.
yeah, yeah.
But you know what? Town Called Malice was a great song
Ah,
to sing along
phenomenal.
to. Loved it, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I wasn't going, oh, let me kind of work out what does that, oh, Paul means this about this, you know. You're right. It's like actually, first and foremost, they're great songs that I want to hear over and over again and I want to
Yeah.
sing along to live in a mosh pit. Great.
Mm. I mean, when we're at a gig, Grandad's half pissed. That's me. Stick on Malice, watch him dance, and Malice is just a great song. But again, he's left the Style Council, and it's the Paul Weller movement. That album that was thrown away wasn't the first album that was thrown away. I thought that was great by Chris Parry. That
Yes.
music shit, and then he come up with
Go
all
and do
my
it again.
cons.
Yeah.
But he does, don't he? When you think of like, he's been knocked back on an album, and that must really hit ya, because them songs are all your babies, aren't they? You've brought them to life. You've put them there, and then someone says your work shit. Then he comes up with like all my cons. Then he comes up with like the South Pen, album, that White Album. Like you're thinking, fuck, songs from. And then
Yeah.
like Wildwood and Stanley Road. I mean, he really in the mid-90s hit a purple patch, but he did bottom after the Style Council, didn't he? When he went into all the kind of like rave type of scene, and
Yeah, he
then
was completely lost, and
yeah,
I find that really
mm,
interesting, the conversation, and that comes again from so many angles. But
yeah,
he talks about going on this European tour with the Paul Weller movement, went to
mm,
Italy, and he just said like, I didn't know how to do it,
mm,
and and that's like what I mean. He spent at that point like what's he done? 20 years
yeah,
making music, let's say, from being a kid and whatever, and he didn't know how to do it. He was like, I didn't know how to be a band leader. We would just go round and round in circles. We didn't know how to finish a song. It's just ridiculous, isn't it?
bizarre.
But I love that honesty. I mean, I've never heard like people, somebody like Van Morrison, who's also had periods where he's been lost, or
Mm,
McCartney talking in that similar way. I love that honesty from Paul. He's so open, and I've caught him at a really good time in the conversations I've. But he's able to kind of be reflective on that. But that's remarkable. Like you're here, and it's really interesting again to hear that kind of rejected Star Council because I managed to track down the guy who made the phone call to John Weller to reject it, say like it was passing on the message, and obviously John went. But it's also like how like Polydor have made all this money from Paul the Jam,
yeah,
the Star Counts, and whatever, and then reject the album, and then like what comes next? And I think the rejection then leads to the great music after. Don't get me
mm,
wrong. I don't think that last Star Council album. Don't.
mm,
So and they had to make a commercial decision, and I like that kind of the fact that we get this story from all angles, like I say. But I don't think without the rejection, you wouldn't have got songs like "Has My Fire Gone Out" and that kind of self doubt stuff on the Wildwood album, particularly. And then would we have got then off the back of that this kind of peak that is Stanley Road and what was it, 1.5 million albums? Because I think, and I said this before, it's like when his back's against the wall and he comes out fighting, that's when you get some really amazing material. True Meanings is another one of those, I think, where it's
yeah.
like he's 60 and he's kind of, I don't think A Kind of Revolution really landed as well as he wanted it to, and he was a bit written off. And it's like, that is an album. 22 Dreams is another one. So there's all these
Yeah.
kind of different points. I think actually where we are now is one of those. I don't think the covers album from fans, what I've seen, kind of brilliantly received. I don't know, maybe 66.
Mm.
I think people are kind of like, I don't know whether Paul reads all this stuff, whatever, but I think maybe at the minute is coming out like, what am I going to do next? Coming out fighting next. I don't know, but it certainly felt, I think, write off Paul Weller at your peril, man, because like whatever's going to come next is going to be standing.
But to be fair, I mean, he could just like write "Happy Birthday" and sing it, and I still think it's
I'm
fucking
not one of
great.
those
You know
fans
what
where
I
you
mean?
just sing the
I
phone
mean,
book,
I'm
but
absolute like proper like with Weller. But again, the song that drove him into to that, the solo artist that was Paul Weller, was "Into Tomorrow." Well, I
Great, what
mean,
a great tune, great tune.
I mean, like you just think the kid just keeps coming up with absolute belting songs, and I don't think there will ever be a time. I mean, I love the when people are saying, "Well, when you're going to retire," and I love the analogy when Weller. I've heard him say this. What I'm going to do is fucking grow carrots or something, you know? And you just can't imagine Paul doing anything other than
No.
just making music. I mean, Black Barn, what a place. You went down there, didn't you? I'm looking at before you come on, what makes it magic? And it's like, it just is, it's, it's like anything, isn't it? It's within the walls that make it magic.
Yeah. Yeah,
Looking
I think
into it, you'd say, yeah,
it's a wonderful setting. I mean, I don't know if you've been down that way, but
never been there.
Ripley, you're next to Wisley, which is like the Royal Horticultural Society place,
Mm,
and we go there a lot with the kids. It's a beautiful place, and so there's lots of beautiful countryside around. So I
yeah,
think I think Paul talks about it being almost a bit like the Manor in Oxfordshire, where they had that kind of run of albums that was Richard Branson's run of albums in
yeah.
the early '90s, and that was a residential. And Paul really likes that kind of like staying there, creating music, staying up late, whatever, but you're stuck in this place. So I think he's kind of created his own one of those with Black Barn. It's obviously Weller HQ, so the business runs out of there, and
Mm,
Charles Reese, the studio engineers, there all the time. And other bands come in, like the Blow Monkeys recorded Birdsong, their most recent album in there. Stone Foundation have been in there recording recently and stuff. So he's constantly kind of lending it or hiring it out and whatever. Um, but it's an amazing creative place, and there's something. You're right. There's something in the walls, I think.
mm,
And I'm not a musician. I don't create in that way, but they all talk about. And that's just amazing. But what I also love is it's a place where anybody can come in. So if you can play, you can do anything, they'll embrace you, and you leave your ego at the door. And this is a Danny Thompson thing. Danny sadly passed away a couple of months, but Danny's in the book, and he talks about it. But Paul and the team have kind of taken this saying from Danny, which is all about just not having an ego. Like when you come in, we're creating music together, and it doesn't matter who you are. There's no kind of pecking order. Everybody's idea is valuable, and let's just kind of create music together. And I think that's a beautiful thing. But I think that the fact that this is kind of the ethos of Black Barn as well, that it doesn't matter who you are. Yeah, I mean, Tom, who's in the band, Tom Van Hill, went in as work experience and ended up helping Charles Reese fix the studio roof.
yeah,
And now he's in the band touring the world. They've been to
yeah.
Australia and Japan and America last year,
Mm.
Amazing.
But again, that's Paul, and if you can do it, and he's always had his band of merry men, a little bit like Robin Hood, the biggest one being Craddock. I mean, what a
Mm.
gig he's had, Eddie, David Craddock. And also, like, with his Ocean Colour Scene and his solo stuff as well. I mean, to blend, I think musicians are just different class because they can, footballers only play for a team at a time, don't they? Then they get transferred. But like Craddock, he's been well as lieutenant, hasn't he, for so many years now, Steve? What a
Yeah.
guitarist he is.
Yeah, there was that bit in the 90s where 90s, yeah, end of the 90s, early noughties, where Ocean Colour Scene was so massive that he was
Yeah,
struggling to balance the two. And actually, they then had to coordinate the calendars of the management of Ocean Colour Scene, the management of Weller, and put them together and go, look, so that Steve can do both,
yeah,
let's put this together and run it as one team in a way, because that's how valuable Craddock was. And yeah, but I think he's also he's back to that kind of collaborator and that creative
yeah.
thing. Steve brings stuff to the party,
Mm,
and Steve's willing. And Paul talked to me about this, and I asked Steve what Paul saw him. He thought Paul saw in him, and it is that kind of he wants to move forward. He wants to create different. He wants to kind of not stand still as well, both in his own music and it's his own solo stuff's really interesting. But
it is.
certainly the stuff with Paul. But the last album, the covers album, Find Eldorado, Paul gave that to to Steve Craddock as a kind of project to produce. So
Mm,
actually, all the instrumentation, everything was Steve, and Paul was almost a vocalist, really, which I
yeah.
think is fascinating. I love that idea. And yeah, they've got an amazing relationship that's over 30 years now.
Because he does a lot of production as well, don't he, Craddock? I mean, he is another musical genius, Steve Craddock. I think he's one of them that really goes under the radar by people that don't know, but people that do know and see him, he's just again a music genius and stable of Paul's. So what's next for Dan Jennings?
That's a very good question.
Yeah,
I love doing the book.
yeah,
I would love to do a similar project, maybe a different artist. I'm kind of toying with some ideas on that at the moment. I think I don't know if you know the Mark Lewison book on the Beatles. I've mentioned this before, but so he has he got basically a deal to do a 3-part biography on the Beatles. Did part one, it's massive, it's huge, and then he did an extended version of part one. This was 10 years ago. We're still waiting for part two. At the one point, this book, like I said, was 1.5 million words. I'd love at some point to kind of maybe revisit it. I think you could expand it out. This is not me going cashing in, but I think there's so much that I had to chop that is really valuable stuff. So if there's an opportunity to kind of at some point expand it out to, there's a as big a book that's the Jam, and maybe as big a book as Style Council, bigger book as Solo. By that time, Paul will have no doubt released another 5 solo albums or whatever. So, I hope that I can keep in with the Weller Circle. It's been lovely, and we can do some more collaborative stuff in the future. That would be a real dream. But I'd also like to look at some of the other artists that I love to do a similar thing, maybe not necessarily the podcast, but certainly from the book point of view, will be great.
When you actually met Paul, finally seeking Paul, and you met him, what was it actually like? When you, was that wasn't the first time that you'd met him, of course, but what was it like just to be in the studio and go, well, this is the final piece of the jigsaw here, Paul, and we've what a journey. I mean,
Yeah.
how many people, how many podcasts was it? 150,
So he was 180,
180.
and which was amazing. And I think
Yeah,
he said himself, "I don't even know that many people."
yeah,
And then, and he said a similar thing when I did 250 for the book. He's like,
yeah,
who are these people?" And he does know that he has. They're
yeah,
all
yeah, yeah,
connections. I've not made them up,
yeah,
But no, he was lovely. To answer your question, he was just really genuine, really warm. His manager was like, see how we get on. If it's like 45 minutes an hour, that's great. And then like 2 hours later, we were still chatting. We had a little break. I then did another interview for about 66, which was the album that's coming out. We then had a little playback of the album, that album with all the Polydor lot, the record label at that time were all in. So we all listened to it. And I chatted with Paul and I bought him a couple of vinyls. So we chatted about those. He was just really lovely and really genuine and
yeah.
really nice and welcoming and not closed. There was no questions that were kind of off
Mm,
limits. I was able to ask everything I wanted to ask and more. And then since then, had a couple more times with him as well. I've seen him at a couple of gigs and gone backstage and chatted and stuff. So yeah, he's just a delight, man. It's like, I mean, what an amazing thing. I'm just a fan who created this daft little podcast, and here we are 5 years on. And on the day the final podcast went out, Claire, his manager, was like, "Welcome to the inner circle," and that's daft. And then I got like a preview copy. I think of one of was it 66? Maybe it's the next album. And I was like, I don't know if I like this because I want to be a fan and I want to hear it for the first time on release day.
yeah,
So don't send me it. I'm kind of in this weird position where if I wanted to hear the Cafe Blur box set that's coming out in January, for instance, this
yeah.
amazing
Sounds good.
deluxe thing, and there's an August 1982 demo of Long Hot Summer, I want to hear, desperately want to hear. If I wanted to, I could probably go, oh, can I have a little sneak preview? I also want to be the fan on the 30th January it comes out and the box set lands in the letterbox and all that. So it's a really weird thing, but it's been a joy to be part of the whole thing and to get that access has been and that kind of endorsement as well has been like magical. And to see the reaction, I mean, what was it on the week of release? A Sunday Times bestseller. It was like the
Yes,
fifth biggest selling book in the
yeah,
UK, like ludicrous. And then it's in loads of like end of year things like Uncut magazine and Rough Trade and all sort and Resident and Shindig. The new Shindig comes out in 2 days' time, and it's one of the books of the year. And that's like that's amazing. But all the thing I really love about it is also I can imagine Paul flicking through Uncut magazine, and then he comes to it, and it's like, oh, I just think that's brilliant because he reads those things cover to cover, and he's going
yeah.
to see that, and that's really cool. I love that. It's brilliant.
Just a phenomenal project. How can people finally purchase it? I mean, I purchased mine through Amazon. I think.
It's available, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah,
So the
yeah.
great thing is, it's my mum. I think at one point my mum thought I was printing this in my bedroom and sending it out to people. So it's not one of those books. It's a proper book. So it's in yeah, it's in Waterstones. You can click and collect it if it's not
Yeah,
in your local one, and it will get there in 2 hours for most of them, I think. I've signed a load of them. If you're in Woking area, I've signed a load of them at the weekend because they kept selling out, which is brilliant. Yeah, Amazon, all the independent bookshops as well. You can ask them like Rough Trade Resident, but also all the little ones around the UK who are so brilliant. They've been so supportive. Can all get it in. So yeah, just go and ask your local. If you like supporting your local bookshop, just go in and ask. And it's actually in some of the libraries as well. So you can you don't want to pay out for it. I mean, pay out for it, but if you don't want to pay out for it, you can go and get it from the library as well.
but again, it should be in the libraries because I mean, the full works of Paul Weller is more important to me than the full works of William Shakespeare.
Okay, yeah, I'll
And
go with
and I
that.
remember reading there one of the contributors to the book had mentioned about in school, these are poems really that are put to music. And when we were in school, all I'd done is argue like fuck about the Blues and the Villa. We read nothing in school in English, I promise you. So when it come to my literature examination, I wrote about Down in a Tube Station at Midnight by Paul Weller. And I mean, I didn't get very good marks, to be truthful, but neither did Paul at school. So it's quite unbelievable that he's just made so produced so many iconic songs, and I think that, you know, finally, Tube Station has got to be one of the most iconic songs ever written in the history of popular music, I think, in this country.
It's a great song. I mean, I love the idea that he wrote the lyrics
Yeah,
and then chucked them in the bin because he didn't think it was any good. I
that was
mean,
phenomenal,
produced
wasn't
it.
it?
Yeah, Vic Coppersmith Heaven rescues it from the bin. But I think it's right. I think what you say is like that's important. That was important for me, the book, because I
Yeah,
think, and again, why I was really kind of adamant I wanted it to be the full story because there are so many songs that are of such high quality that means so much to so many people. So you have to tell the full story all
yeah,
the way through, and it's a great narrative. It's a great story arc. You could turn this into a TV series. You know,
mm,
there's so many brilliant tales of a life well lived. You know, but ultimately, yeah, great thing about a physical book is that'll live forever.
yeah,
So I would hope that in
yeah.
50 years somebody will find this somewhere and be like, okay, there's this guy Paul Weller, and the music will live on, and they'll discover music of the Jam and the Style Council and solo. That's a brilliant. That's so great.
And what a legacy he's left us. So I've never really met the guy. I did go backstage once, and I think I shook his hand. But all I would just say is thanks, Paul.
Big fan, big fan. Yeah.
You have massively influenced me throughout my life, and the stories of my life and the songs of my life would all be from Jam, the Style Council, or Paul Weller. So thanks, Paul, and thanks, Dan, for putting it all together in this wonderful book. But people do want to say thank you, Dan. How can they get hold of you on social media? And
So if you just search for Paul Weller Fan Podcast,
yep,
you'll find on Google my website, you'll find me on Instagram, Twitter or X, or what we're calling that this week,
yeah,
and Facebook and all that. And yeah, get in touch. It's lovely to hear from people. It's also great. I mean, people have been leaving reviews on Amazon and stuff. So regardless of where you buy the book, you
yep,
can leave a review on Amazon for both the audiobook or the hardback. Which has been really good at and helping for it to kind of find a wider audience as well. And we're up to like nearly 200 reviews, which is utterly
yeah,
insane. I think like the biggest selling Paul Weller book on there previously, which has been out 2007, I think, has had about the same number. So it's like this
yeah.
has only been out 2 months. It's mad.
But I
So
do
thank you
think
to everybody.
this
It's brilliant. You
is
know,
a different class of book. I've read an awful lot of books about Paul, but I do think that this one, Dancing Through the Fire, you've absolutely nailed every issue, every component part of Paul's career with the people that were there at the time, and you've done it in a very humorous way in this book. As I said, I was pissing myself laughing with when the gig that's what's it, Funeral Parlour as well, pissing themselves laughing and all the rest of it. But superb, a wonderful,
thanks, man.
wonderful job that you've done, Dan. You should be very, 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 very proud of your achievements because anybody that likes Paul, that likes Style Council, likes a Jam, you must get that in your collection because it is off the scale. 10 out of 10, mate. Well done.
Bless you. Oh, that's really
Thank you.
kind. Thank you so much. That means a lot, man.
Thank you. Cheers, Mucker.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
And thanks for watching and listening, guys. Means a lot. Thank you. Cheers, Dan. All the best, pal.
Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
Wella,
Cheers,
wella, wella.
Shut up.